Hello, and welcome to the second episode. In the first episode, we explored a bit of Napoleon's life, from aspects of his youth, education, and family life, to his early experiences in the army and some of the battles that would be fought. We start today's video by looking at the year 1800, Battle of Marengo, 1800. The events that would occur at Marengo would be varied and would have different outcomes in a location that would be somewhat consequential in the whole history of the wars. It saw the involvement of a French and Austrian army which had gone through various events throughout the past period. Some of the challenges that the Austrians would face would include limitations in terms of staff and competency, as well as challenges with equipment, illness, and other issues. Though efforts had been made to mend certain aspects that the Austrian army was going through, but some challenges still remained, and a portion of them would come to play a role in the outcomes of the battle and war. Other events that had recently occurred in this period had included events like the Siege of Genoa and events that had occurred concerning the loss of territory like Milan and Piacenza. Some of these events had adversely impacted Austria. The Battle of Montebello had also occurred sometime in June, and it had seen the contribution of many people in a conflict that would have a bearing on this one. The Battle of Montebello had seen contributions from France and Austria, and would involve, amongst others, people like Jean Laune on the French side and Peter Karl Ott on the Austrian side. It would occur in Lombardy and would end in a loss for the Austrians. Also there or contributing would be individuals the likes of General Major Anton von Zach, Ott, and Francois Watrin. The battle had involved the use of batteries. It would, in addition to this, see many casualties. The Battle of Marengo, on the other end, would be a battle that ended with French victory and would see several individuals involved, seeing fierce fighting. It would see contributions from the French Republic on whose side were people like Napoleon Bonaparte, Louis Desaix, Jean Laune, and the Habsburg monarchy on whose side was Michael Melis. At the end of the fighting there would be negotiations, which would see the participation of Melis and would see the Austrians vacate some of the regions they were in. Other benefits would come from the Battle of Marengo, including an improvement in Napoleon's political position and an advance in the way that some people viewed him. It would also grant him more power from which he could carry out some of the changes he had wanted to complete. The battle would see several strategies take place, as alterations would be made over their course and as novel information would be encountered and new situations would be met. It saw the use of at least one double agent as well, working for the Austrians who would act in the Austrians' favor and influence French strategy. Previous events had also seen the Austrian supply line become compromised in some ways, and the events of the battle would see several casualties, amongst whom would be individuals the likes of Desaix. It would also see several people wounded, and some individuals captured in a battle that would see fierce fighting amidst the use of several tactical points. Amongst some of the events that would occur over the course of the battle, Napoleon would have to adjust his strategy as he came across new evidence. Other issues would arise as well as errors. The battle would see an error in thinking and a poor prediction by Napoleon. Errors and possible mistakes would also occur on Melis' part. The conflicts would also see Desaix fall eventually, but the casualties on the Habsburg side would far outnumber those on the French side. Torre Garofoli would function as the headquarters for Napoleon for some time in the course of events. From there, several incidences would originate. The conflict would occur in June 1800. Prior to it, several events had arisen, amongst which were some that would leave the French army in a not as good as before state by 1799. Added to which would be challenges like limited supplies and deserting soldiers, challenges that would have a bearing on the situation. The Austrian army had also gone through some of its own devastations with disease and casualties. Both armies had made attempts at improving the situation of their respective armies. At some other point in time, Napoleon's forces would be forced into a retreat as Marengo would be taken by the Austrians. And at another, the French would try to hold their position of San Giuliano. Melis would be injured at some point in time, and we'd see the increased participation of Anton von Zach. At another point in time in the proceedings, Zach would find himself captured along with some of his men. By the end of the many actions that characterized the day, as well as the numerous changes in who was winning the conflicts, the Austrians would eventually find themselves being forced into a retreat as the French advanced, gaining location after location. Here's how events would unfold. Many actions had occurred that would impact the communication and supply lines of the Austrians. Amongst some of the events would have been a voyage across the Alps by Napoleon and his forces. Other events would see the capture of several cities like the cities of Pavia, as well as Milan and Lombardy. These events would have an impact on several others. Genoa would surrender in June, and this would have effects that would have a bearing on Napoleon's preparation and his hopes. The Battle of Montebello would also occur sometime during this period, having ended in victory for Jean Laune and the French in a battle that had occurred in Lombardy. It had also involved persons the likes of Peter Karl Ott, and had seen several casualties on both sides. Events following would see the involvement of a man that would go by the name of François Tolly, a double agent, who would act to misdirect Napoleon, hoping to move him in a direction that would benefit Austrian plans. Many Austrian generals would support the plan that had been made in order to move the Austrian forces. Louis Desaix at one point in time would be sent south by Napoleon. Forces under Joseph Chabran, Jean-Thomas Guillaume Lorge, Jean-François Cornu de la Poype, and others would be positioned in other places. Fontaine Bridge would also play a role in events, which would also see the establishment of a bridgehead by the Austrians as well. The Fontaine Bridge would be the site of many events. Other areas of note or areas that would be involved in the battles in one way or the other. Serving as strategic points, locations of battles, important landmarks, pathways, or several other purposes would include Castel Ceriolo, San Giuliano Vecchio, and Marengo itself. The conflict would see the advance of the Austrian troops, but several limitations would be met. An Austrian advance guard would exist under a man known as Colonel Johann Maria Philipp Fremont. Several attacks would be made on the French. Fighting would be fierce, filled with several setbacks, achievements, and moments where attempts at gaining an advantage would fail to achieve their goals. FML Karl Joseph Hedek von Futach would fall, a man who had been a cavalry soldier and had also served as a commander during the extent of his life. He had also been involved in several other conflicts like the War of the Bavarian Succession and others. Other casualties would include Desaix, a figure who had been involved in several other events. At some point in time, Kellerman's men and forces would move to reinforce the French position. Eventually, Napoleon would realize some critical points, and this would have a bearing on future decisions. Things would start looking favorable for the Austrians at some point in the course of events. With the French troops under Napoleon having to retreat during the battle, and the Austrians gaining and achieving certain locations, things would come to a point where the French would catch themselves under the pursuit of Austrian forces in a battle that had had several actions occur in it. One that had also seen many changes in the direction things were heading in through the influence of various factors and individuals. Several factors would be behind the change in tone from a somewhat predominantly positive situation for the Austrians to one that favored the French. Behind some of these factors would be the speed by which the French would be able to act and the lack of speed in some of the Austrian actions. Several backs and forths would occur in the course of the battle. Things would change once again, however, and the Austrians would be forced into retreating. More and more of their troops would panic, withdrawing. Some of them would find themselves demotivated and dissuaded by the events of the day. They would lose numerous men in this conflict. That marks the end of the second episode into Napoleon Bonaparte. In the next episode, we will continue looking into the events that would occur around that period. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please take the time to subscribe for more episodes on other topics.